I think when she said.
There you go. I think it has. Yes. Okay. All right. So good evening, everyone. Or good morning, good afternoon, depending on which time zone you're in. My name is Krish Ashok. I'm the author of Masala Lab, The Science of Indian Cooking, and I'm here in conversation today with Dr. Nandita Iyer. Dr. Nandita Iyer is a medical doctor, a nutrition expert, and a seasoned columnist. She's written on nutrition, health, and food for over 15 years. Is the popular author of the blog Saffron Trail, a blog that I have used, and I'm famously not a fan of recipes, but it's one of those blogs that I go to for trusted recipes. And is the best-selling author of the book Everyday Healthy Vegetarian. She's been featured in and has written for BBC, Vogue, Femina, India Today, among other publications. Her second book, Everyday Superfoods, has launched recently. Nandita is a student of Hindustani classical music. And this is, one of those books. As someone who's never really read nutrition books ever, and as someone who's also always felt that either the science is changing too much or there's just too much, pseudoscience and new age kind of content on the nutrition side, I found this book to be a pleasant surprise. I found this to be a very readable, non-preachy, and kind of really struggling the accurate science without pandering to people who want to go after the new age, this is a superfood, the trendy sort of way of thinking about it, as well as being too academically dry. And I think it really hits that sweet spot. And I truly think everyone should read this book, available on crossword.in and in the Crossword bookstore. So I'm going to chat with Nandita here. But before we get into the book and get into some of the things she's written about, I want to ask her, tell me a little bit about your journey, the fact that you have a medical degree, to then nutrition, to blogging, and then becoming a best-selling published author.
Thank you, Ashok, for that really generous introduction. And I'm glad that you liked the book. So a little bit about my journey. So I studied I studied science in college, and I think as 70s kids, a lot of people who are 70s and 80s kids will identify with the fact that in our times, if you just got good marks in a subject and you automatically studied the subject that you got a seat in, and especially if it was medicine or engineering, there was really no other, people wouldn't think about looking at other options. Like, if you got this, then why would you look at something else? So just like that, I studied medicine because I got admission into medicine. I did have a flair for the sciences, for sure. Right from my early school days, it was one of my favorite subjects. So it was not with regret. I joined, and I actually enjoyed the studies also, though it was very grueling. And all the hobbies that I had as a child in school, etc., I had to give up because medical studies leave absolutely no time to pursue anything else on the side. It's all consuming. And so then I finished my, once I was done with my final MBBS, certain events happen that kind of make you take another path, or they just show you another path. I think the first of those events was that being such a good student all through medical college, in my final year MBBS, I was declared fail in medicine, which was my favorite subject. And having been in the 70s and 80s percentile all through medical, and suddenly being declared fail, was like, I've never failed any subject until then. And in the final hurdle, when that's the all important year of your graduating from medicine, and of course I knew that there was no possibility of me failing. I had done the exams well, so it was like a double shock. I didn't understand why and how this even happened. And finally, I gave my papers for revaluation because there was I just didn't believe that I could fail a subject that I was good at. And that revaluation took literally 4 to 5 months, so much so that I had to start studying for the next exam. the re-examination, because I can't just sit waiting for this result to come. Like the typical government kind of things taking their own time. And despite me, visiting the university every few couple of weeks and sitting on head, it never happened. And I was all ready. I had studied, and also medicine is the hugest chunk of final year MBBS. It's like if the entire final MBBS was 1,500 marks, medicine subject alone was 500. So it was one third of the entire curriculum that I had to go through all over again. And I was all set. I had got my exam, like the card. And then 2 days before that, I get a call from the university saying, "Your pass, you come here. I'm not putting it in the post because you will not get it before you go for the exam." And that's because I had gone every couple of weeks and befriended everybody in the university saying, "Where's my paper? Where's my, reval?" And it was, of course, a huge sigh of relief because I didn't want to give those exams all over again. It's a nightmare I still get often, So then, but then, that kind of got me off track because my entire classmates and my group of friends, everybody had moved on to internship while I was still sitting jobless waiting for my results. I kind of feel being a fast tracker, I became like an off track person, doing. And then I was all through internship, I was posted single, like on my own to all these places for the different internship assignments because all my group had gone ahead. So I think that was one thing that was a big blow, and kind of lost steam in that whole, race to then further do PG, do surgery, and other dreams that I had. And I thought this was very demoralizing. And then I think the second thing that happened was when I actually finished my internship and I joined an intensive care unit. There was this massive political riot that happened there, and I pretty much escaped from there like a matter of life and death situation, and I was happy to get out of there alive. And that was another thing that I realized, that possibly this kind of stress of medicine is not for, I mean, the kind of side things that happen, like doctors getting beaten up and rioting, getting caught in the middle of things where you have no business to getting caught in. And that was another thing. I think that was the game changer for me because it was like way too stressful. I said I can handle the stress of medicine, but I can't handle the allied stress that comes along with this. And then I moved on to healthcare advertising because I always had that interest in writing and creativity and all, which was kind of taking a backseat during my medical days. And then, like from healthcare advertising, and I started blogging a little later because that's when I actually started cooking a little bit in my late 20s. Like I said, medicine doesn't leave you any time to explore any other creativity or hobbies. And I started cooking in my late 20s, and that's when I started documenting my cooking experiments because I was such an intuitive and instinctive cook. I would not know the second time what I made like yesterday. So if I had to repeat a dish, I would never know what went into it. So I thought, okay, let me keep a note. And it's easy to put it on a blog because it's searchable. And if someone wants, I can just give them the link. And I had no idea what food blogging was. So that's how very accidentally I started food blogging. And because of my interest in cooking caught on, and then I said, okay, let me, because of my medical background and my cooking passion, let me also study a higher course in nutrition, because it's not a subject that's touched upon much during the medical college days. There's a subject called preventive and social medicine where you learn a little bit, but not really in depth about different aspects of nutrition and nutrients.
Probably at a societal level as opposed to a individual level, which is what is.
Yeah. And also the science of nutrition, it changes at a much faster level than even like a surgery could be done pretty much in the same way for a few years. But nutrition science, like today, what is a nutrient? Tomorrow, it can be like the most anti-nutrient. So, the way things evolve, I said, okay, let me study this properly. So I did a course in that. And then that's how this all came together, and I started writing. So then my passion for cooking and then my writing and my medical degree and nutrition degree, all of it came together. It kind of channelized in my blog. And then thanks to my blog, I got a lot of I started writing a lot, like as a freelance writer. And then the first book came about in 2017. And then the second. Sorry for the very long story, but I can't, I have to cut it too short.
No, absolutely. I think it's very fascinating and it's very relevant. given the, I think we all grew up as 80s kids who lived in that India that where you just had to take the career that you got an opportunity in, right?
Yeah.
Not something
Yeah.
that you could do. And also, it's interesting that you talk about some of those aspects of how sometimes you don't get an opportunity to cook if you are studying medicine. And it's just backbreakingly brutal. And I think I also I particularly appreciate the point about nutrition actually being complicated in a world where I think people seek simple answers. And they just want a magic ingredient, that they could just drink or eat and then solve all problems. And we have these easy ways in which all of these social media and these messaging apps spread all of this sorts of misinformation. So I think it's a very fascinating journey, and I think it puts you in this sort of right mind space where you can balance the science, the medicine and the science, along with what is practical and what is doable, because you've sort of lived it yourself. So with that, I want to sort of get into your book itself. Superfoods, right? So it's a term that I've been seeing for a while. It's a term that's been around on the internet. It kind of got popular. I think maybe 4 or 5 years back. Typically used in the context of things like kale and blueberries and stuff, right? So which is usually what you sort of see as, oh, this is a superfood and so on. And then more off late, the West seems to have discovered turmeric and things like, say, moringa. And so those are now suddenly become superfoods, and certain kinds of seeds and acai berries and all those kinds of fancy ingredients. For some reason, but beyond the marketing hype, what are superfoods, right? So how did this book specifically kind of come about, as in why everyday superfoods, right? And what kind of research, given the sheer volume of misinformation and conflicting information that's out there? So what was your research methodology in going about this book?
Okay. So, when I started looking at superfoods, I'll answer your question in like 2 to 3 parts. So, just talking about the term superfoods itself, the earliest mention of this term, the first mention was in a Jamaican newspaper, in which there was, it was an advertisement for wine, and they used the term superfood to market the wine. And somehow they just thought that was catchy, or because I don't know in the 1940s and 1930s if they had actually found out that red wine has resveratrol and it's rich in antioxidants. And I don't know what the science, nutrition science situation was then, but that was the earliest mention. And the second earliest mention of it was in 1949, again in a Canadian magazine, where the term superfood was used to describe a muffin. So maybe they just added some blueberry or bran. I don't know what happened to, what was added to the muffin that they called it a superfood. But and you can understand that wine and muffin are not the first things that come to our mind when we even think about superfood in today's time. So clearly, there were some key marketing, people behind, marketing brains behind, this whole terminology, where they thought that even wine and muffin could be marketed as superfoods. And of late, of course, in the last at least 1 decade, this term has caught on, and it's got a lot of mileage. And food marketers love to use this up front and center in the labeling of every product and food. Like, say a granola bar, which is say 100 grams, could have like 1 gram of turmeric, and they'll call it, okay, superfood bar.
Superfood enriched, right?
Yeah. So this is a much abused term in today's times. And anything that says superfood on a packet is something I would say, please look at it with a lot of suspicion and a healthy dose of inquiry as to what is happening here and what's actually in this product. So that's the whole thing about superfood currently. The second thing is why this book is, of course, like you started off the talk, there is so much misinformation around nutrition and health, of course, at large, but also nutrition, because I think anyone and everyone who, who just experiments a little bit on themselves and then they say, okay, this works. This is the best, this is the best way to lose 20 kilos in 1 week, or this is the best way to cure cancer. And now to add to all of that insult, there's WhatsApp, which is like, it's like a forest fire when it comes to spreading this kind of stuff. And even on things like YouTube or Instagram, when these kind of videos are put up, which like completely oversimplify something or offer some very
Right.
unrealistic solutions to any problem, these are the ones that go viral first, because even
Exactly.
people and us as a society, we don't have the time or we don't have the inclination to invest our thinking into our own health and our own well-being. We just go with somebody says something and it's oversimplified to such an extent that, oh yeah, that is the best answer, and people just rush behind that. And that's the reason these kind of videos get millions and millions of views, and the whole algorithm is done in such a way that the videos that have got millions of views will be the first to be again shown to more people, right? I mean, you
Exactly.
know that
Exactly.
better than me. And like when these videos come up on search, they'll have those like 10 million views, 15 million views on their thumbnail. So people will automatically assume, oh, so many people have viewed
Yeah.
that. And that view is kind of taken as a validation and a scientific verification of this whole thing, which it is absolutely not, right?
Yeah.
Because if it was actually scientifically valid, it would require so much more in-depth understanding. It cannot be explained in a 1 minute video for sure, or even like a 30-second thing on Instagram. And there's so much behind it, and it is so different from person to person. So even if they have done so much research, that same information cannot be true for everybody. And even in
True.
my book, I don't claim that everything is good for everyone, or it's so personal, and nobody other than yourself has the time to figure out what your body is like, what works for yourself. So that kind of time and a time investment into our own well-being is so important. But this whole clickbait kind of information just tries to oversimplify things, and people just jump on the first thing that they see and they believe it, and it's just like a vicious cycle. And it used to
Absolutely.
frustrate me to no end. But then I thought, okay, let me write a book which is which I think is a good way to educate people how to even understand these things better. I don't claim that my book has all the answers for all the questions around nutrition, but how to even make sense of these labels, how to make sense of this misinformation, how to be a little bit baseline educated about nutrition, such that you can see that if someone is just talking nonsense, you know that that is nonsense. Even if it goes to that level, I'm very happy. So this is in general, what is superfood by the book, and yeah, and what research went into it. I, like you said, blueberry, like any, you see top 10 superfoods, you Google, and you will see like a listicle on like BuzzFeed or anything else. And the top, and it's all like, written for an US or a Europe kind of audience. And the
True.
first thing will be blueberry, which is like, if you have to buy it in India, which you do get in cities, urban cities, like metros and stuff these days. And like a small packet of 100 grams is some 400 rupees. So one,
Yeah.
is it even, and it's imported from wherever. So it's got a huge carbon footprint. It's got a huge price tag. And is it even possible to consume it every day? And what about the people who are not even in metros? They don't have access to this. And the second is, of course, kale, which is kind of grown locally these days also. And, it is sold by a lot of supermarkets, etc. So I have nothing against kale and blueberries. But this is not the first thing that is easily available to everybody in the country. And,
True.
and that's also like people say, oh, I don't have access to that. It's so expensive. Where will I get it from? So I can't include it in my diet. So I wanted to give a very accessible kind of a list, or a kind of what do you say? I wanted people to know that these are the things that are easily available in your backyard, and you can easily get them. It's not very expensive, so that's why the term everyday. Now, superfoods, you get all kinds of fancy superfoods, right? But what are the superfoods that you can have every day because it's available, it's local, it's not very expensive, it's very versatile. You can make it in one way today, you can make it in another dish tomorrow, and you can actually make it a part of your life. And this is what is sustainable in the long run. Because just one day I buy a very expensive blueberry and I made a smoothie out of it. What
Right.
what about the rest of the days? And health is definitely anything in health and nutrition. You only have to see long term. There's nothing short term, and there's no spot benefit about, I just ate this today and I have the benefit today. It's about what you're eating over a long period of time, which is why the term,
Absolutely.
I often say that the term everyday, like though the superfood part is very beautifully highlighted here, the everyday is also very, very important in the title of the book. And every chapter conveys that this is how you literally change your whole lifestyle. It's gradual, it's slow, but it's sustainable, and you can actually continue following these things for the rest of your life.
Absolutely. I think I want to, before I get to the next one, I want to sort of summarize some of the really very important things that you said, and also some things that I learned when I sort of read the book. See, one is, I think, and it's important that people understand that, and as you say in the book, that one is that the content of the internet, anywhere you search on Google, you get on WhatsApp and so on, all of those have what you call a popularity bias, in that what is shared more is what is more popular. It's not what is more truthful, right? So there was a sort of recent research from MIT that said that that the misinformation travels 6 times more effectively than verified information or fact checking. Right? So it's actually 6 times harder to fact check misinformation. And I think, so that's, you make a very important point there. I think the second important point about nutrition is the sense of it being personal, highly personal, right? You could argue that, I think, if a surgeon is, sort of cutting into a heart, or doing something like that, there are still largely lots of similarities between hearts of, most people.
Yeah.
There may be some variations and so on. But nutrition, on the other hand, is literally almost unique to every individual. Within the same family, somebody eats a ton of food, does not put on weight, and the other person in the family is obese. And we all have such a personal relationship, and I think that is an important thing that you kind of bring out. But to your point about this sense of sort of thinking local, so that it's more practical, that I think is really, really important. And maybe if you could maybe touch upon some examples of, rather than blueberry, which, as you said, it has to the carbon footprint of blueberry. And by the way, there's a fascinating behavioral aspect. People who spend $1,000 on blueberry and eat it, they psychologically feel, okay, I've done my superfood eating part, so now I'm going to compensate by eating something really cheap, low calorie, high calorie, sugary thing, and that behavior actually then ends up, counterbalancing. So, maybe give some examples of some of these practical, locally available superfoods.
So, in this chapter called the Superfood Compendium, I have included 39 local superfoods. Now, again, why 39? Why not more? Because it's a small book. I cannot include possibly everything. And these are what I thought that were reasonably available throughout the country. Because see, India also is like, it's a country, but it's also like a continent, in a way that there are so many different microclimates and so many different regions and cuisines. It's not possible that everyone has access to all these foods. Like millets grow locally in Karnataka, and things like avocados grow in Chikmagalur, again in Karnataka. But I can't expect that avocados to be growing in, say, like a city like Delhi or those kind of places. So it kind of, I've tried to include things where people can again pick and choose what is available to them. But largely, I have tried to focus on different regions where, the Lakadong turmeric from Meghalaya, or there is the, Amla is in UP, it's grown heavily. So different, but a lot of these also get transported and they are available to most of us within the country. And that's how I ended up picking the ingredients. One, they had to be versatile, so that it's not just limited to one particular use. Then again, that everyday context is lost because it can only be had in one way and you can't really do much with it. You can't make it a part of your daily diet. And the second thing was that also how much are we able to eat it? Like, earlier I had included something like nutmeg. Now, nutmeg is used in very minuscule quantities in food. How much can you use? So even
Yeah.
though it's very rich in certain nutrients, the quantity that we consume doesn't justify me
True.
including in the thing. But then again, I used black pepper because it can be used every day in pretty much every
Right.
savory dish, and it enhances the active ingredient in black pepper, which is piperine. It improves the absorption of curcumin, which is the active ingredient in turmeric, by like
Turmeric.
50x or more. So it even though even if you eat just turmeric, but if you eat turmeric with black pepper, you're getting much more enhanced benefit from the turmeric itself. So certain ingredients become very important in this context, and of course black pepper can be used every day, unlike a nutmeg. So
True.
it was like trying to select people in a job interview. Like, I lined up everything, and then I researched with the help of papers in medical journals, etc., that what kind of health benefits for our day-to-day use. I'm not looking at very specific niche health benefits again, because we are looking at overall good health and that kind of benefit, right? So for
Absolutely.
like what do you say, complete well-being. So
True.
lined up all these suspects, and try to find out who fits the bill in terms of all these criteria that I had lined up, and then I picked up 39 out of that. So in that, even when I sat down to write this, I didn't know so much about so many things, and like I said, it's a constant learning.
True.
And
True.
during the course of research itself, you understand so much. So something like Amla, like everyone knows, and especially since COVID, Amla is in like so much demand
Oh
that
yes.
people are drinking amla juice, amla kada, amla smoothie, you name it, because it is rich in
Right.
vitamin C, and everyone knows that vitamin C is good for immunity. And
Yeah.
it's just being people are using it I mean, also in the context of COVID and the pandemic, which doesn't seem to be getting off our backs. People have become more and more conscious about eating
Right.
these kind of antioxidant rich, immunity boosting,
Yeah.
superfoods, and like the that is the right thing to do, because we have to do whatever we can to keep our health in good stead, because I think we
Absolutely.
don't know, things are so unpredictable, and we need to take care of ourselves. So something like amla, like
Yeah.
this is the general baseline information everybody has about it being rich in vitamin C, good for immunity, and etc., right? But the things I realized, and also a very it kind of made me in awe of our culture and our Indian way of doing things. And it just had that wow effect for me. What I realized during the course of research, I won't say I discovered this, because I'm sure people know about it. See, something like amla has a very short season. It's available during Jan, or like December, Jan, and
Right.
it's so good. And our ancestors obviously knew that it's having these kind of benefits for it's kind of prevents a cold, or it helps in some way. They have realized it's good for us, and to make sure that the amla lasts for a whole year, there are at least I know of half a dozen ways in which this amla is preserved, with absolutely no technology, no gadget, nothing fancy, no fancy ingredients or gadgets or techniques. And things like one pickle, with oil and spices, etc., lasts for the
Right.
whole year, even without refrigeration.
Right.
Secondly, just sun drying amla. That's the second way. Third is preserving it in honey. And like many of the people will be aware that honey is one natural food ingredient that will not spoil for thousands of years if you don't put some
Right.
water or something
Yeah.
into it. So preserving amla in honey, which itself has its own antibacterial properties, etc. So again, this lasts forever. Then putting it in brine, which kind of has a shorter term lasting power as compared to the other things. Then things like amla supari, again using sun drying. Then amla murabba, which is again just grating it, mixing it with sugar or jaggery and keeping it in the sun for a few days, again lasts the whole year. So I realized that something simple ingredient like amla, short season, but people have realized its potential as a superfood even in those days, and how they have devised simple ways and means to make it last for the whole year. And in fact, I was so fascinated by that fact, and I've actually put a separate box about the preserving, the ways that Indians preserve amla. And I was like totally say wow, because this is so fascinating. So this is like a small example of how something local, something simple, and just using sun, using some salts or sugar
Yeah,
or jaggery, whatever is available, and creating a situation where something can last for the whole year. So
absolutely.
this is also my discovery during the process, and these are things that I've shared in the book also, about our local foods and the local ways in which we've been using it.
Absolutely. I think it's as a general wisdom seems to be that in general, when if you're sort of looking for ways in which you can preserve, you can embrace local superfoods, it's better to just look at what your grandmother was doing as opposed to try to find internet research on what gadgets can be used to do that. But I think one point you mentioned, I want to sort of dig into that, is this another term that we've been hearing for far longer actually than superfoods is the term antioxidant. And I feel that the average public probably looks at the word antioxidant and goes, isn't oxygen good for us? I mean, we breathe it and so on. So in the context of food, in the context of nutrition, in the context of our bodies, what are antioxidants, and why are antioxidants important for our health?
Okay, so I'll just try to touch upon this in brief, although it's like a very detailed kind of process into this whole thing. So there is a process called oxidation, which happens in our body. It happens to food. Uh, this is kind of a cellular damage, which is also natural because as a part of your general metabolism, cells get damaged and new cells grow, etc. And the cellular damage is caused by something called free radicals. Now, free radicals also naturally occur in the body, and free radicals are also important when it comes to your immune response when your body is trying to fight off like a foreign bacteria or a virus or something. So, free radicals are not entirely bad, but when the when the number of free radicals in the body increases, there is more than normal oxidative damage. And antioxidants are molecules which occur in food. Common examples of antioxidants are vitamin C, vitamin E, vitamin D is also an antioxidant. There's lycopene, which occurs in cooked tomatoes, and it occurs in
Tomatoes, yeah.
watermelon. So these are again very powerful antioxidants. Zinc also has a benefit in this. So what happens is these antioxidants are molecules that stabilize the free radicals. So it's like what do you say? There's a riot. It comes and like tries to calm down the crowd, and now people can disperse off peacefully. So this antioxidant, it calms down the free radical by donating its own electron to the free radical, thereby stabilizing it, so the free radical will not cause other damage. Now, this oxidative damage is the basis of a lot of it's a part of aging and wear and tear, of course. That's how we age, that's how our cells age. Our skin sags, and all the signs of visible and invisible signs of aging. But this oxidative stress also is the reason for chronic diseases that cause, due to inflammation. One is the cardiac disease, one is diabetes, cancer. All these are a result of some kind of oxidative damage. So when people are following a very poor diet, like a very highly processed food diet, when people smoke, these already our body has this oxidative damage going on. You are just giving it a further push, and these things happen at faster rate. And at that point, your body, your general diet or what you're eating every day, or the antioxidants that are naturally produced in your body are not enough to. It is like the rioting crowd is so much, but the police is only few, so you can't really help. So when you eat a diet that is rich, like you have a focus and you eat the kind of things I've listed down in my book, where these are all proven antioxidants, and you you keep that balance up in a way that you are ready to face free radical damage. You're ready, you kind of reduce the chronic inflammation going on in your body. So that's a simple way to explain it. But then again, always when other products start saying that we are antioxidant, like suppose your granola bar or your cereal, or like even your chivda, or like random stuff that start labeling themselves as antioxidant rich, please don't fall for that, because it's best that you get these from natural sources. And also, taking antioxidants as supplements, like I'm sure on Amazon, if you search, please don't search, but I'm sure you'll find it. If you say antioxidant supplements, I'm sure you'll find quite a few. But even taking too much of a synthetic antioxidant can have other kind of damage in your body. So it's a very delicate balance, but nobody ever gets damaged by eating enough fruits and vegetables, because your body will take what it needs, and you don't decide the dosage there. It's just that it happens naturally, and it's safer, and it will eating, like nobody ever had a problem eating more vegetables and fruits. So and lentils and like our natural foods, right? So that's the in nutshell all about free radical antioxidants. And so there is a reason we do need to eat antioxidant rich food, but don't look for it in on supermarket
Right.
shelves or on in supplements.
Right. And I think one of the things that you said, right? So don't overcomplicate it. Just simply just don't try to search for antioxidant pills to eat them. Just eat them in natural sources, and so on.
Yeah.
I think that sort of brings me to another thing that I particularly liked about your book, and in fact, it is my favorite section of the book. I think you can always Google and find out what superfoods, what they contain. You can find recipes for them and so on. But to me, I think the one reason everyone must read this book is the section that really talks about changing your relationship with food, right? It talks about the mindfulness and what you need to do in order to really think about food in a fundamentally different and a more healthy manner, right? So I want you to talk a little bit about that part. I think that was one of my favorite sections of the book. And I think I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Uh, okay, so I think mindfulness is something even I personally struggle with, and it's not that because I've written it, I've got it all sorted. But our way of life today is such that we are always multitasking. Even when we eat, we are either watching something, or looking at our phone, or sometimes even before I have my lunch, because that's my work break from work, I try to think about what am I going to watch when I'm eating lunch, because that's my kind of screen time where I can watch something on Netflix or YouTube or something. So even I'm totally guilty of that. But the thing is, when your mind is occupied in watching something, one, you don't realize how much you've eaten. You don't kind of soak in the flavor of the food, how it looks, how it's tasting, how it feels in your mouth. It becomes a very mechanical process where we're just continuously shoving spoon after spoon of food into our mouth. And at the end, after like that 10 minutes or 15 minutes that you took to eat the food, if you think about it, you may not even realize, sometimes you will not know, have I eaten today's lunch? Maybe, because we are so caught up with something else, and we've not realized. So if we don't even remember if we've eaten lunch, how are we going to kind of process what's in our food? Have we eaten a balanced diet? Have we included all the good foods in our plate? So that's like much second, third level of thinking, right? So and it also it's been shown that it's hugely de-stressing. It kind of it helps combat a lot of eating disorders, when you just sit down with the food, focus on it, and you know um, uh, you just make it like an experience where you're having that shared relationship with your food, and you understand better, you understand what you're eating, you understand what changes you need to make, you understand what is the right quantity for you, because a lot of times we don't even know what is the quantity that we need. As a kid, I remember we used to always have rice for lunch, and I used to sit down with my grandparents, and I would tell my grandmother, I can't take the rice because I don't know how much I eat. I only you will know, so you serve me. So at the rice, only my grandma served me because I kind of thought that she knows how much I will eat. So it's like that. We don't even know what is the quantity that will fill us up, or are we taking too much? Are we taking too little? There are so many. And another level of mindfulness is, who's cooking the food in the first place, and from where have your vegetables come? How did you decide what you want to eat for dinner? Was it some random thought? So there's so many questions you can ask when it comes to being mindful about the food we eat. I think it's a huge step in uh, this will kind of reverse our poor relationship with food like no other diet book or no other thing can, because it's just being deeply introspective and just understanding for yourself what is good for you, and that is something you will follow. It's tough to follow if someone puts a few rules on us and says, hey, this is your thing, just do it. You may do it for 1 day, 2 days, eventually you say, tuck it, I'm not going to follow this diet or whatever. But when that realization hits that what is good for you, and how certain foods are helping your body, how certain foods are not helping your body, you will realize what to choose. And this kind of very deep understanding only you can get it with respect to your food. No third person, no book can explain this. So I've just tried to give a few steps, like a few exercises, and a few thoughts that I want to put in the reader's mind, that think about these things and slow down a bit, and be a little more mindful about what you eat,
Yeah,
and put some more thought into your food, because that's the one important thing that's going from the outside world into your body, and which affects
true.
literally your every cell. So how can you
Yeah.
not be so concerned about it?
Yeah, yeah, and uses most of 60 or most of our the energy that we eat from food goes into digesting food. So that's the something
Yeah.
that we don't realize. I think it's a very important point that you kind of make this relationship with food, and particularly I think as people who live in urban environments, we seem to have lost that relationship almost a couple of generations ago, when we obviously people who don't grow crops on their land and so on. And again, in India we have a complicated setup where it's only the only absolutely marginalized in the society who actually have a relationship with the land and with where the food comes from, and literally everyone else is
Absolutely.
just simply just consuming. But I think one interesting thing, there was this sort of very sort of viral video from a year back that talked about how one person wanted to make a chicken sandwich from scratch, meaning that he couldn't buy anything from a store, so he had to either grow everything, and so on, right? So, and he realized that it actually took him 8 months to do that, and it cost him $1,500. And the most expensive part of that was the fact that he had to drive to the sea and collect tons of seawater to evaporate it and make salt. And then it took him about 6 months to grow the wheat. And then the hardest part was actually, dealing with the chicken and actually getting the meat and so on. So I think, sometimes we don't realize that asking simple questions like who's making your food and where is your food coming from will, easily, as you rightly say, will change your food habits, your relationship with food. I think, that's a very important point that this book sort of brings up. And I sort of want to logically extend that to this question, particularly relevant in the subcontinent, right? On the sort of very tricky subject of vegetarianism, veganism, and in some sense the environmental sustainability argument against regular consumption of meat versus the more moralistic religious argument for the same, and the ability for sometimes people to sort of combine both of these. What do you think is the sensible approach to looking at one's own diet, your culture, your tradition, and so on, and then eating healthily and sustainably, given these sort of complications?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and I would like this to be more of a discussion than just
True,
me sharing my
true.
thoughts. See, I think any kind of lobbying or activism is always so extreme, and to find any kind of nuance in that is very difficult, because when someone turns vegan, or with due respect to all vegans, I have a lot of vegan friends. They want to turn everybody vegan, and everyone becomes a kind of an evangelist for the kind of diet they follow, be it a keto diet or be it a vegan diet, or so anything. There is really moderation doesn't catch any eyeballs anymore. The more polarized your views are, and the more polarized your thoughts, you get more eyeballs and you get more following for that ideology, right? Because when you are saying be moderate and eat a little bit of everything, like food guru Michael Pollan says, eat mostly eat help me with that quote. Eat little, mostly plants, and I kind of
I think eat
forgetting the
food.
exact right.
Yeah, eat food. Mostly plants, not too
Yeah,
much. Yeah.
yeah, eat
So
food, mostly
food.
plants,
Yeah.
not too much. So
Right,
that
and the
those.
point about eat food, and his definition of food being it shouldn't come out of a packet. I mean,
Hmm,
it has to be an animal or a plant, or
yeah.
something that that comes from nature. So that's also the distinction of food itself. There, it's quite a yeah.
So that is like, what do you say? It's just like a few words, but it contains a world of food philosophy in there, and you can possibly, I mean, write volumes on the understanding that one can derive from this very simple sentence. So, any kind of industrial farming, or industrial poultry, industrial, what you call animal husbandry, is of course bad. It's bad for animals, it's bad for the land, it's bad for the environment, it's bad for the person who's eating it, because you don't know what kind of antibiotics, what kind of medications, and what even the grass that the animals have been eating must be grown with pesticides or whatever. So it's a complete chemical cocktail that is not. However, you are in pursuit of eating protein in your diet, this is not the good kind of protein that anybody should be eating. Also, this is what is available more cheap. I think even if you look at if you look at a well done, like a good brand of chicken which says it's antibiotic free and whatever, it's definitely that is going to be more expensive. But your regular chicken which is available in those cages, and it's the industrially farmed poultry, that's going to be much cheaper than paneer also. So if you look at if you tell somebody who cannot afford another protein source, and if you tell them, hey, you need to eat like a grass fed organic free roaming chickens or something like that, or eat plant based food, it's not going to be possible. So everyone's situation is different, and everyone's life story is different, the economics of it, the affordability, what the culture is. So I think that is one thing, and it's very ridiculous to kind of generalize and say everybody should be plant based or everybody should eat meat. Each person follows their own ideologies. That is one. Secondly, when it comes to, if someone can actually afford it and they are concerned about the environment and concerned about their body, then you should definitely follow Michael Pollan's philosophy, where you also know that that chicken is coming from a sensibly place where they're not pushing antibiotics and stuff, and you know where it's coming from, and you pay a slightly more premium, but you eat a little less of it. That way you compensate. I mean, everyone may not be able to eat huge portions. And also, the thing is, in smaller villages and stuff, we always, like, when we travel here and there, we'll see that there's a small house and there'll be a couple of chickens running around. There'll be possibly a goat tied to the
Goat. Yeah.
yard.
Yes. Yeah.
And these chickens, first they use for the eggs, and once they no longer lay
Right.
eggs, this is the same chicken that they will cook it up, because literally this is the cycle of life and nothing goes waste.
Exactly.
Same for the goat,
Exactly.
they may use it for the milk and to maybe have a couple of other goats, and then that goat's life cycle is over. And in that kind of situation, you are just living one with the land, one with the cycles of nature. You're not
Right.
literally supporting an industry that is farming like thousands of goats stuck to each other without any room for breathing, or which is just plain animal cruelty, and it's also not healthy for the person eating that kind of meat. So
True.
there is so many aspects to this. And personally, I'm a vegetarian, and I just I don't understand. I have nothing again. I don't have any extreme views on that people should stop eating meat, etc. But for the good of the planet and for your own good, you need to find out the correct sources to, if you can afford it, and if you are mindful about this, you need to find the right sources, and eat more plants. That's definitely, it's important for good health and well-being.
Right.
And
Right.
if you still want to if you can continue eating meat, but eat more responsibly, like they say, drink responsibly. I think eating
Right.
meat is also should be done responsibly.
So you're right. I mean, the interesting, the dilemma obviously in this part of the world is, on the one hand, we have a fast growing sort of wealthier part of the population at the top end of the spectrum, economic spectrum, that is in many ways sometimes consuming unsustainable protein, and so on. And you have the other end of the spectrum where kids are not getting enough protein. So there is it's an interesting sort of dilemma, right? And sometimes I think what ends up happening is that if you then impose the kind of values that you need to impose on the top end of the spectrum on people who really need to be getting more protein, and they need to be getting it as cheaply as possible. And if that is eggs, and if that is locally sourced poultry and so on, I think we need to, the larger structural issue of the fact that industrial farming of animals should not be as cheap as it is. Right? So there is and more importantly, as a society, we need to figure out ways in which we can give sustainable, cheap, affordable protein to poorer children and so on. So it's obviously a tricky issue, and I think the important point you make here is one that this is a nuanced issue. It's not one where we can just sort of morally grandstand and say, oh, my diet is more superior, morally superior, or bring religion into this at all. So I think it's an important point. So with that, I want to sort of
There are a couple of questions, if you would like to go through in the
yes.
comment section.
Right. So I was just going to get to the. There was this one question from Harshil Shah on what's the one ingredient that has amazed you over the years?
Not sure I have an answer to that. I have so many favorites. But like I did tell you about the Amla preserving story, and that's something that recently really amazed me, and it did have that wow effect where I realized how in Indian culture we end up preserving a simple ingredient with absolutely no technology and nothing fancy. So that was one. So your question I already answered. But I have no such like, I think the more I discover any ingredient, I just love it. The more I use it, and it just everything is great.
Yeah,
No
absolutely.
such
I think
special.
I guess if you really look at the history and the stories, if you really just dig into how something is grown and how it gets to you, right? I have a feeling that we'll all be amazed by every ingredient.
Everything, absolutely.
Even something as simple as atta, from the
Oh my
wheat
God.
plant to it getting to your atta is a phenomenally fascinating process and complex
See, I'll
process.
tell you a simple thing here. I had this lime plant in my kitchen garden, lime bush, and for 5 years there was no activity going on, and I was getting like really impatient. I said, "What the hell is happening? I got this from a very good nursery, and he promised me that I'll get a lot of limes." And it was a morning ritual. I'll make my tea and I'll go up to my garden and I'll like inspect the plant, how many flowers, how many I'll keep checking its progress literally on a daily basis, as if something is going to change daily. I was so obsessed with having some homegrown limes. And after 5 years, 5 6 years, I started seeing some flowers, and then in the first year it gave me some 5 or 6 limes. That's it. Then next year it gave me some more, and then like last year I had more than hundreds. And the thing that I realized is that once the small green lime appears, it's like literally tinier than a pea, like 1/4 the size of a green pea. And slowly it grows in size, and then it'll be a full-sized green lime, and then it takes another few weeks to turn yellow, and then you pluck it and then you eat it, because the green one is so hard you can't even squeeze it. It's kind of
Right.
stony. It needs to be a bit ripe so you can squeeze the lime. And I'd put this post on Instagram. I said, how on earth is a lime available for 5 rupees or less? Because
Exactly.
this kind of patience, it takes like 4 months to 5 months from appearance of that tiny little thing on your plant until you are able to pluck it. Like the first time I saw that, I said, wow, in 1 week I'll have limes. It took 4 months of waiting. Same for
Absolutely.
bananas. When I grew bananas at home, I realized, how on earth is being sold for 20 bucks? This should be
Oh
sold for
yes, yeah.
200 because the kind of
Exactly.
patience, effort, and stuff that goes in. Whether this is not a $5 thing,
Exactly.
So
Right.
that's how amazing it is when you see something grow. You realize that this is not a general, ordinary lime which you just squeeze on your bhel puri or
Yeah.
something. This is magical because
Yeah.
it has
Or
taken so
wasted. Right.
much.
Yeah. Exactly. Right.
It has taken all of nature's power to make that tiny little thing into a full grown
Right.
lime and then ripen it and then you eat it. And
Right.
because you've not used any chemical fertilizers, you've not used any ripening agents, it takes its own sweet time. And that is
Absolutely.
nature. It's
Yeah.
an exercise in patience trying to grow
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
And like you said, this is the every ingredient I've grown in my garden, I've like been thinking this is a miracle because
Yeah. I mean,
it is a miracle.
my favorite is actually sugar cane because today
Yeah.
we just take sugar for granted, right? It's just so it's cheap and it's absolutely
Cheap.
essential. We buy it in
Yeah.
like kilograms.
Yeah.
The sugarcane plant is a notoriously hard plant to and hard grass to deal with. I mean, the
Yeah.
leaves are so sharp. The guys who actually harvest them they wear like sacks so that it's almost as sharp as a machete. I mean, like literally just slice
Yeah.
your. That's how
Imagine that
sharp the
it's such a tough thing that it gave rise to this whole indentured laborers,
slavery.
Indians
It
going
say it is
all over
sugar.
to the
Right.
plantations in
Yeah.
Mauritius
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
places like these to because
Yeah.
Indian labor
Yeah.
was cheap and it was
Exactly.
heartbreaking when I heard these stories and when I saw these
Absolutely.
things when
Yeah.
I traveled to
Yeah.
Mauritius recently and that's when I dug deeper and
Yeah.
you get a flavor of that in some of Amitav Ghosh's novels as well
Exactly. Right.
and
Yeah.
this is the kind of effort that went into making sugar. People became slaves, and you're getting it
Exactly.
for 50 bucks a kilo in your Swiggy in half an hour. I mean,
Exactly.
that kind of
Yeah.
shocks you, you know?
Exactly, exactly, and it literally it drove colonialism. It essentially drove literally all the last 400 years. Sugar has been at the center of literally every bad thing that has happened to poorer parts of the world, like Asia. I mean,
Yeah.
it used to be richer, but then impoverished simply thanks to the power of sugar. It's actually very
Yeah.
interesting. I think you make this great point that building this relationship with food is such an important thing, and I think it sort of makes you more mindful. I think you naturally, if you know the story of sugar, you'll probably eat a lot less of it, which is anyway, I think, a good thing in some sense.
Yeah.
So with that, I think as we kind of get to the art, I do want to sort of ask you this question on so what's next, right? You've had Everyday Healthy Vegetarian and now Everyday Superfoods. What's the third? What's the trilogy? What's the next everyday book, if you will?
Um, Next is not an everyday thing. I'm working on a couple of books right now,
Mhm.
and um, maybe the trilogy will be completed later. I
Later,
don't
yes.
know.
Yes. Yeah.
But there are a couple of books in the pipeline, and while these book promotions happen, I'm facing those deadlines on the other end. And yeah, so it's an interesting process. And I also want to explore some, like my first book was mostly about cooking, the second one is more about nutrition. So it's kind of gets monotonous if I keep focusing on the same thing again and again. You also need a break from those same topics to come back and look at it with fresh eyes and so yeah, so I'll announce it when I announce it. I'm not in a position to announce it right now, but before people go, I want to say this is the book, and you can get it on Crossword Bookstore. You will
Yeah.
find the link in the comments, both online as well as in bookstores. So stay safe. If you can't travel out, please buy it online. And yeah, so I would love to know what you guys think of my book. So this is in brief, and yeah, if there are any other questions or anything
Right.
else that you have to say.
So it was fantastic chatting with you. And I think the book is very insightful. And I think far more insightful than I generally expected the average sort of nutrition book to be about. And I think the key things that I learned, particularly the mindfulness and the changing your relationship to food. So that by itself solves half the problem. Behavior and is half the problem. It's not what you put in. All the stuff that you do before you put it in is really half the problem. And I think, and also this fact that food superfoods are all around you. Right? We've listed amla, we've listed even things like tomatoes, and
Yeah.
lycopene. You spoke about lycopene and so on. So there are all day-to-day
So
things
even
just around you.
onion, basically even onion and garlic,
Right.
there is
Which is every
everywhere.
day, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Every day, 3 times a day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that and essentially also thinking about sustainability, thinking about the impact on the planet and so on. I think it's a wonderful message overall. So it was a pleasure chatting with you.
Same here. Thank you for asking me some questions that really made me think. And
Absolutely.
thanks to Crossword for organizing this, and my publishers at Bloomsbury, India. And thank you, all of you who tuned in on a weekend evening to listen to us chat. And do check my book out, and see you around.
See you. Bye bye.
Bye.